Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Aysha Schomburg, from Healing, New York. Looking forward to our conversation today, Aysha. Really am.
Me too.
Yeah.
I am as well.
Yeah. So, listeners will normally know we start off with the thriving question, but because you're healing New York, I I've got to ask you. Healing's in your heart, healing's in your genes, in your bones. I don't know. I mean, what does healing mean to you, Aysha?
Well, what does healing mean to me personally? I feel like healing is, well, one of the things I want to start off by saying, Simon, is that we changed our name to Healing New York in January after being known as the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children for 150 years. And the reason why we were called the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children goes back 150 years and is actually a whole nother conversation. But what I will say is that after talking to parents, talking to our partners, our board members, our community members, it was not the appropriate name for us anymore. Because while at one time we were rescuing, severely physically abused children, we are now focused more on trauma recovery, sexual abuse prevention training, and so and supporting parents with the concrete support that they need. So we are really leaned into a healing space. And we all felt as though Healing New York was a more appropriate name. I just wanted to sort of set the stage for that and give a little bit of history
Yeah.
because we are newly healing New York because that's what we want to be what we're doing and what we hope to be doing, and it's both, I think, current and aspirational.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I think of healing, though, for personally, I think healing, and I do feel like healing is different for different people, and healing um, can mean different things in different situations. And I always say to people, like, as long as you're breathing, you can be evolving. I think that as human beings, we should evolve and we should change. And I feel like also healing may be different throughout the course of our lives, depending on what it is we are experiencing, and who's around us. So for me, healing can be complicated. It's not just one thing like, oh, I suffered a bruise, and 6 weeks later, my knee healed, or I had a breakup, and 3 months later my heart healed. I feel like healing is more of a journey and more of an internal process. So when I think about, like, I'll give you an example, a very real example, where in my biological family, there was a disagreement many years ago, and a couple of us have not spoken in many years. I'd say almost 10 years now. And for me, I feel, even though there's been no, and I've talked to one of my sisters about this, because for her, healing means reconciliation. It means that we are going to go out and go to the movies together and go to dinner together. But for me, healing means I have forgiven, I have not forgotten, I wish everyone well, and I feel healed in that situation. I don't necessarily need the reconciliation in the way that she views it in order to be healed from that situation. I feel healed because in my heart I've forgiven and I can move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible, isn't it? The difference between. I mean, I love the way that you gave it breadth, right? So it's personal, it's situational, and it's life. It's something to do with where we are in our life or our life cycle. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think I sometimes wonder whether or not people give where we are in life, um, the gravitas that it really deserves when we're talking about healing and thriving. And so I think I think yes, healing is unique to different situations.
Yeah, yeah. And just back to the name change, right? We used to have here in the UK. Well, we still do. Yeah, it's called the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, and they're still known as NSPCC, despite like your organisation has changed.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me
and I
tell you what
imagine that.
a
Sorry.
parent told me about that a couple of weeks ago. We had some parents here, and she said, "Thank you for changing the name because whenever I saw cruelty to children, I felt like I was reminded of our scars as a family."
Wow, wow.
And we don't always need to be reminded of our scars or reminded of something maybe that has happened in the past. So,
Yeah, yeah. Um, And there must have been a lot of thought behind the name, right? That you've got all that history.
yeah,
There must have been a focus on, what is it that we want to convey with this new identity? How can we, um, how can we kind of, because it's so well known after so many years,
you're right.
and so it's a
That's right.
transition period, and
It was a
people getting
huge
to know.
transition. And we did think a lot about it. And first we thought about, okay, what do we do? What are we trying, what are we doing for the community? I mean, we are based in New York and we do have some work that we do in other parts of the nation, but like what is it that we're doing and what do we want people to, what do we want for the people that we serve?
Yeah,
And I think, we had several conversations about this over the course of many months. We had the benefit of Deloitte helping to lead us through this new name and rebranding. And even when we start to think about, for example, our logo and colors and all that, I mean, all of this has meaning, right? But when I say we collectively, we here at Healing New York, and again, like as I said, our partners and families, we wanted to, it was clear that we wanted to focus on healing as opposed to the scars, as opposed to the trauma that has occurred, for example, with a child or with a family in the past. Well, how do we get through that? How do we help families and how do we help children individually move toward healing without regard to whatever it is they have experienced? And that has been our sort of our North Star.
yeah,
And that's why we leaned into this name.
yeah. And just to shout out listeners, I haven't done this for a while, but every episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast, there are show notes underneath on your on your device on your screen with links to the organisations and the people that I'm interviewing. And I was having another look at Aysha's organisation site before we came on today, and there's lots of really great resources and events. So for professionals and for parents, caregivers. So I would urge you, if you're interested in what Asia's talking about, check them out and find out
Thank you,
what they're
Simon.
doing. Yeah. Um, for me, you mentioned the bruise and healing from a bruise, and for me, there's a there's a fantastic richness to explore the difference between like physical physical healing and emotional healing.
Yeah,
And people, we use all these metaphors like in the adoption space, like the primal wound. And okay, so how are we going to heal the primal wound? Um, and I think that allows us, those metaphors allow us to talk about these issues, which are otherwise pretty tricky to talk about, but they can also kind of become restrictive
yeah,
in some ways. We've created a metaphor to turn something that isn't a thing into a thing, right? It's like
right.
thingification. Yeah.
Right.
And we make something that is perhaps uh, we make something that is perhaps abstract. We make it concrete. Does this any? Am I making any sense? Is this?
Yeah, and you're making sense is because, and I use the example of the bruised knee because sometimes it's really hard for us to grasp, we're just people to grasp the abstract. And so that more concrete thing, sometimes that more literal thing, sometimes makes it easier. But I feel like, as you pointed out, with healing, it really is not that simple. You can watch a bruise on your knee heal. You know that it's
Yeah,
going to heal. You can see that. When we're talking about emotional healing, that's a completely different
yeah,
story and a much longer story usually. Yeah.
yeah. Um, So you said it, you talked about internal, you've talked about emotional. So for me, I guess and for you, like emotional healing is a change in our feelings or a change in how we feel about something.
Or it could be a change in how we experience our feelings. Like, I don't, when the example that I gave earlier about my family members, whatever, I don't necessarily feel any differently, right? About the bruise, right? The emotional bruise that occurred. It occurred. I still, if it were to come up again, I would stand my ground in terms of how I felt then and how I felt now. But how I experience my feelings are different. And
Yeah,
so it allows for me to heal. So I don't experience it anymore where there's severe hurt and um in a way that's disruptive to my own personal peace,
yeah.
you know. I
So
experience it more I experience it more as like this thing has occurred, um uh but I'm choosing my emotional peace, and therefore the healing, and it has taken some time, but the healing for me has been, oh, ooh, this is the fact is, these are the facts. However, I don't have to experience him in the old way. I can experience him in a new way, which is to acknowledge that a thing occurred, but that I have individual will to move forward, to wish others well, and to maintain my own personal
yeah,
peace and my own personal healing.
yeah. So is it a change in the way that you feel about your feelings?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been an evolution of how I feel.
Yeah, yeah,
And I do think, to your point, also earlier, is that it does have to do with where I am in life. I am not where I was 10 years ago or
yeah,
5 years ago.
yeah.
Because, right, as human beings, we evolve.
So I was looking at something this morning. I was preparing a a talk that I'm doing, and I came up with this idea of trauma liberation, which on one hand we can say it's freedom from trauma, uh, and also we can say freedom with trauma. Right. So
Mm,
freedom with trauma for me is about that change in how we feel about the trauma, how we feel
yeah,
about our feelings. And I heard somebody talking about this a couple of months ago, and I think they called it psychological flexibility. So
interesting.
it's not a change in, they were talking about it in not being a change in how we think, but a change in how we think about what we think. Right? So it's our relationship with our thoughts, our relationship with our
Right.
feelings.
Right.
We're at peace. And as a mentor of mine says, if we're okay with not being okay, we're always okay. Yeah?
Yes.
Because fighting feelings
Oof,
doesn't
that's
work. I
that's
mean,
exhausting.
that's exhausting. And you've mentioned the word peace at
Hmm.
least three times
Hmm.
um, so far today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's been my choice. I think when I think about, because I think that's how I think about healing sometimes, for me personally, is that it's an internal peace. It's like, okay, well, I'm at peace with the situation. You brought up trauma liberation, which I love. It just and so yes, in that particular circumstance, I am living, I have freedom with, right,
Yeah.
the healing. And but it makes me want to think about, okay, so when have I had freedom from a trauma? Like, when have I said, can say to you, oh, it's not only how I'm experiencing it, but I've closed the door on the trauma and I'm healed.
Yeah. And that's a trickier one.
It
I, th-
is
I
much
think I
trickier.
think freedom with trauma is a lot easier than freedom from trauma,
Yeah.
right? we think we're burdened with it. I recall reading the Primal Wound book. So, are you familiar with this book? Have you heard of this book? Shall I give
I
you a
have
bit?
not.
Okay. So, an American MD, which I understand is like a general doctor. Is that correct? An MD is like a
Yes.
general, like a
Right.
family
It's a
doctor.
medical doctor.
Medical
Yes.
doctor, yeah. So here in the UK, we use the term GP, a general practitioner, right?
Okay.
So a general practitioner is like an MD. So it was an MD, an MD in the States, a lady called Nancy Verrier. She had two daughters. One that she'd given birth to, her biological daughter, and she also had an adopted daughter. And she was trying to understand the difference between their two, let's say, temperaments, for want of a better word. And she couldn't find any. This was in the 80s, and she couldn't find any research in this. So she decided to research that area, and she came up with a book called The Primal Wound, and
Okay.
this was published with 1993 in 1993. So until that book was published, the adoption space was trauma blind, right? We were unaware of the trauma, and I think of also this when I think of this, I think about a general societal blindness to trauma. So trauma didn't really become a thing from what I've heard until the 70s with all the post-Vietnam
Right.
PTSD thing.
PTSD. Yeah.
PTSD. That's when trauma kind of became a thing.
Hmm.
Realized as a thing in the 70s. So that's the broader society in the 70s, and then the primal wound kind of brought a trauma awareness into the adoption space in 1993. So, but I read that book 12 years ago, I think, perhaps something like that, and I I didn't believe that I was primarily wounded till I read that book. So that book changed my thoughts about my feelings about my feelings. So the first thing that happened with it, there was a relief in a diagnosis, and
Yeah.
then the diagnosis felt like it was going to become an identity,
Mm.
and I
That's
felt that was
tricky
settling.
because it's kind of like you feel seen, but then it's it's like did you want it to become your identity? That
Ah,
feels different. That's like I'm
no,
I
I was I think my because it's 12 years ago, can't be sure, but I think I feared being stuck with it.
Mhm.
I felt that okay, so if this trauma's laid down so early, I'm stuck with it. I've been trauma blind. I am now
Yeah.
trauma aware, and now I'm stuck with it. I'm
Mm.
trauma stuck. And but luckily, I was hanging around in some spaces, and I've got a very curious mind too. And I kind of came out of that and realized that I wasn't stuck with it
How'd you come out? How'd you come out of it?
through an insight. Through an insight. For me, people talk about time being the greatest healer, and and that's one of the differences I see between like a physical wound and an emotional wound, right? So the physical wound takes time to to heal. The an emotional wound, it seems to take time, like an apple takes time to grow, but then it
Mm.
drops off in a minute. It drops off in a second. It falls off the tree,
Agree.
and that's what emotional healing. The timeline for emotional healing seemed to me. It takes time, but it happens in an instant, and it happens in an instant where we see something new,
Hmm.
where
It's
we
like
see
it's like an
something new.
epiphany.
An epiphany, exactly. Yeah. I funny if I use that word, right? So I'll say an insight, which is kind of a more brain-based kind of thing, whereas an epiphany, you mean something's that's deeper, I guess. Like an
Hmm.
epiphany is a
Yes.
deep thing for you. So what do epiphanies mean to you, Asia?
Well, I mean, when I hear you say well, as I was listening to you talk, on the one hand, like healing is like an apple growing on a tree. It takes time. The apple falls off. That felt like, an epiphany. In your case, you had sort of an insight, a realization. You thought you might be stuck with this trauma. I'm going to call it like a trauma label,
Yeah,
but you've had an insight to, and what I you said, that's what you said. What I heard was, wow, there was an epiphany, something that freed you from
yeah,
having that identity. And so, but as you were talking also, I'm like, sometimes people have spent a lifetime trying to heal. And so that epiphany maybe never happens, or that apple
yeah.
never falls from the tree.
I I think it's a number of epiphanies,
Mm.
and sometimes there's epiphanettes, right? An epiphanette is like an epiphany, but it's not quite as big.
Right, right.
And then there's a scale. For me,
Yeah,
there's a scale of profundity, and so we've got all these different words for it, haven't we? We've
yeah.
got a eureka moment, an
Mm.
aha moment, an insight, a thought that came to me out of the blue, a shift in my perspective, an epiphany, an epiphanate, a glimpse of something new, a bolt out of the blue.
Yeah,
We've got a gazillion words for insight or epiphany, and there's different depths.
yeah.
There's different depths.
I want to talk a little bit back to the primal wound and adoption, because now there's a lot of conversation. I think even this week there's this webinar happening mostly in the New York community around um it's called about, I can't remember the title of it, but it's basically like we celebrate adoptions, but we're not saying how they have disrupted. And in this case, we're talking about Black families. And so
Right.
there's a celebration for adoption. There's always at least two sides to a story, and everyone has, but and so there's been a lot of talk lately, I feel like in these past couple of months, where people are saying, adoption, as much as they bring family together, they are also an example of where a family has been torn apart. And it's been on my mind a lot because I have no biological children. And I made a decision not to adopt. I wanted children, very, very much so. And I tried everything except adoption because a fear, right? Not so. I'm not going to say that I was so conscious of separating a family, but of the fear that the biological family would want their child back, right? Or that I would raise a child and the child would turn 15 and want to reject me because I was not the real
Yeah.
mother. And so as we're talking about healing, and I don't know that and so I don't know if my decision not to adopt was just a decision based in fear, whether or not it was the right decision. It's an example though of a decision I made that I still wrestle with. I don't know if I'll ever heal from that. um, so that's one example, and just connecting it to this whole idea of primal wounds being maybe on all sides, right?
Yeah. People talk some people say, adoption begins with grief or adoption begins with loss. Some people say adoption is a both and, right? So there's love and loss. There's grief and joy. There's disrupting and bringing together. And so people a lot of these days talk about the complexity of this issue. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
It's very complex.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's a human thing. It's a deeply human thing. Your wisdom led you to an informed decision. Right? Your wisdom led you to that to that decision. So
Wisdom
that
or
that
fear.
wisdom and fear, well, or both. Like a lot of people will say this. I heard it from a social worker a couple of months ago. She said, uh, as any good social worker would say, both and.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But so healing New York and primal wound for me, this is great territory for a great territory for a conversation, you know. But this idea that time is the greatest healer is wrong in my opinion, because if there isn't any change, healing is about a
It,
change.
right. And if there isn't, it doesn't matter how much time
Yeah.
is involved. If
So
there's
we've got to
no,
get clear on what healing is. My first book that I read in personal development, probably 25 years ago, was Stephen R. Covey's Begin with the End in Mind. Yeah.
uh-huh,
You remember that book?
I do.
Yeah. And sorry, sorry, begin with the end in mind. That's his first habit, isn't it? It's the seven habits of highly effective
That's right.
people. And
That's right.
begin with the end in mind. The end in mind that we have is healing. You know, you also use the word resolution as
Hmm.
well. So
And
what does
reconciliation.
and reconciliation? Yeah. So all interesting dynamics, right? 'Cause so we're going from the the uh, the uh, the the healing and resolution, perhaps that, as you say, that internal perspective, and reconciliation. Maybe that's the more the relational experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's what we've looked at healing. So what's resolution? Is there any difference? Am I splitting hairs? Am I being too finicky? I was in publishing for a while, so I can be a little bit pedantic, Aisha.
Um, that's no problem for me. So, were you talking about, are you splitting hairs when you think about healing and resolution as two
Yes.
different things?
Yeah.
Um, I feel like I can be resolved and not necessarily be healed.
Okay.
Um, so I do feel like they can be different. Um, yeah, I think so I don't think it's splitting hairs because I think
Yeah.
they can
You
be
think it's
very
different?
different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, what do you think helps us heal?
And then of course, depending on what the wound is, you know, for me, a lot of it is internal. Like you said, you had an insight, right? In what we like emphasis on in. A lot of healing for me is internal. Like I have to, in my own mind, in my own heart, right? I have to do the work, whatever that work is, to get to that point of healing, or to get to that point of resolve. Of course, in general, it helps to have community people around you, people who are supportive, who help you out. But I
Yeah.
do feel like it's an inside job. Healing is an inside job. Like I don't feel like externally people can heal, anyone can heal me
No,
of anything.
I totally agree with you. And it is head and heart. You know, we have to look at head and heart. You know, I think about um, beliefs, right? Uh, here's one for you. Because often people will say therapy will help us heal. Um, I know a very well-known, and I respect the lady hugely, at the vanguard of as an adoptee and a therapist. She said to me, "We can't heal. The best that we can do is learn coping strategies." And I thought that was, yeah, not very optimistic.
Mm. That's if that feels sad to me.
Yeah, I was trying to put it politely.
Yeah, that feels very
You
sad.
know, so I think we, and it happens inside, but it's often prompted by people outside, like a therapist or a coach. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that because I've not had a lot of therapy, but I've had yeah, gazillion hours of coaching and looking at this sort of stuff, right? Um, and and a coach, in the nicest possible way, is trying to invalidate our beliefs. That's what a coach is trying to do.
Really?
Yeah.
I have a coach too, but I've never thought of it that way.
The coach is trying to, well, how would you sum up what was your brief to your coach, or what is it that, because we've all got different definitions of what coaching is or what the outcome is, but what was it, what's
First
the
of all, let me
outcome?
say that I have had a lot of informal coaching in my
Yeah,
mind that and maybe, coaching, mentoring
yeah,
throughout the course of my career. But for the first time in my career, I actually had a coach designated to kind of help me professionally, because this is my first leadership
yeah,
position within a nonprofit. And so this person has a lot of depth in child welfare, in our discipline, and in moving this forward. So in my mind, the coach is supposed to, I may experience challenges. Let's say I'm experiencing challenges with, how to manage my board, when
yeah,
you've got, 14 bosses. And in my mind, the coach is designated to kind of help me navigate like some of the difficult
yeah,
waters of leadership.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, but
yeah,
I don't, so when you say invalidate, I'm like, has he invalidated? Maybe I have to start it, but now I'm going to be a little bit more conscious and listening for that as we talk.
yeah. I think of, a coach is there to do a multiplicity of different things, and I totally agree with you. It's the informal. It's not just the formal coaching; it's the informal coaching.
Yeah.
Um, and I think about, a coach is there to help you achieve what you want to achieve, and help
Right.
you, yeah, help you
Get to
overcome
that
the
point. Yeah.
help you get to that point, overcome the barriers of on the way. And one of the barriers that's on the way for so many of us is that self-belief, the belief that we can do it. And the coach is there in that sense. That's where I mean they're there to invalidate our beliefs. They're only there to invalidate our self-limiting beliefs, not
I see.
they're not there to invalidate good beliefs.
Oh, okay.
And clearly I didn't make that clear, right?
Oh, okay. Because I was like, oh gosh,
Yeah,
am I missing
yeah,
something?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's just my shorthand. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Invalidate self-limiting,
I think that
self-limiting
that's,
beliefs.
yeah. So that now that's tracking.
Yeah,
Hmm.
good. Yeah, I was a little bit brief in my description now, and so the but we come back. I come back to that question of what helps us heal, and the the other question that comes to mind on that is what gets in the way of our healing. And I think sometimes the self-limiting beliefs, the
Yeah, we
beliefs
can
that come,
we sometimes we have to get out of our own way.
we have to get out of our own way. And But one of the things that would get in our way of our healing would be working with a therapist that doesn't think we can heal.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Every therapist is not a good therapist.
Yeah, we've got to be.
So I think, well, we have to be honest about that. I happen to have a person who I think is a great therapist,
Yeah,
who I've worked with for a very long time, who has who has led me through some very introspective sort of
yeah,
places in my life to get to that next thing. And but not every, just like anything else, I guess all therapists are different, have these different approaches to healing,
yeah.
to resolution, to reconciliation. But I don't believe that they're not every therapist is right for every person. How
No,
about
no,
that?
no. So, what other things for you help our healing, or get in the way of our healing, Asia?
Well, For a lot of people, and probably for me as well, although I'm not a particularly very religious person, I am a very spiritual person. And so you've heard me talk about this idea of peace and living a peaceful life and forgiveness, right? They're sort of, so for some people, religious ideals or spiritual ideals. And so when this belief that the world is much bigger than me, or my feelings, and then also being a purpose-driven person. I wake up in the morning and I have this, I have this extraordinary gift of being able to do this work, right? Where the focus is on children who need way more than I need, way more than I've ever needed, and families and all that. So I feel like being purpose driven, understanding that the world is like I am part of the world that's much bigger than me, and having a spiritual and or religious connection to a higher purpose, a higher being, helps me to heal because I can stay wrapped up in whatever the bruise is that have experienced, or I can make a decision to maintain my purpose, which is really to give to others. And so for me, that helps me to heal. I can't stay waddling in my bruise, because I have to you know I have to give
Yeah,
and do this the work of supporting others in their healing, right?
yeah,
And that helps me.
yeah. So it's a bigger perspective on life.
I think so. It's a bigger perspective on life. It's understanding that there's just a higher power um and that bigger perspective is also like, you know, whatever is happening to me or whatever bruise I have is not the worst thing in the world. So it gives you this perspective of like, wait a minute, am I gonna let this stop me from doing what I need to do? And should I let it stop me? And so when I have that sort of insight, that epiphany where I'm thinking like, whoa, the world is bigger than me, I'm able to move forward. I think some of the obstacles to healing, can again, when I say it's an inside job, it's almost like the word that's coming to my mind is a readiness to move on. We talked earlier about, trauma liberation, freedom with. And so, I can think of a time, I can think of an instance that I have freedom from the trauma. And it did take time, but it was also a decision to be done. And a decision to move on. And so when we think about the obstacles, we can get in our own way, as we've said before, and we have to sort of think as individuals, at least for me, making the decision to move on, move forward, to be free from the trauma. Right?
As you say, talk about moving forward and moving on. I'm thinking about. I heard this analogy years ago about somebody else is in a hole and we put a ladder down, but we don't let them pull us down into the hole. We lift them up.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm thinking that if we let them pull us down, we're going to be in the we're going to be in the hole with them, and we're going to be
We're not going to be
trauma.
able to help anybody. We're going to be
No,
looking for a third person to get us both out
yeah,
of the hole.
yeah, and we're going to be trauma bonding there, right?
And you're right. And so then now, right, or trauma bonding, misery loves company. So now we're both down in the hole. And, unless somebody else comes along, to help pull us out, that
Yeah,
hasn't done anything for
no,
anybody.
no, no, no. Um, and that's not, like you can't be a leader. You can't lead this important organization doing. doing that, right?
from the bottom of the hole.
No,
No.
no.
And that also means making difficult decisions. I mean, I can try to help pull you out, but at some point I may not be the person to help pull you out, right? And so I have to let the top of the ladder go. Maybe I can there's somebody else around who might be able to do more than I could with in terms of pulling that person out. But that's also very difficult where you have to kind of let go and realize,
Yeah,
I'm at capacity with that. I'm not able to be helpful here. So I have to go move forward
pushing.
here
Yeah,
where I can be
yeah.
helpful.
I had a coach, like a formal coach that I saw weekly, and she realized there was a she realized she saw some emotional stuff that she couldn't um, she she pointed me in a different into a
Yeah.
different or a few different places that we tried that I tried out, and particularly one of those was very a very profound um, source of insight for me. So
Okay.
sometimes it is about noticing for noticing when we need to point somebody to a
Right.
different source.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and then that's recognizing our own limitations. Wait
yeah,
a minute. I'm not the person who can help you out, but there may be someone else.
yeah, yeah. I on the kind of the therapy area, I also think about the the modes of therapy, and to put it, there are I don't know 400. I think the last time I heard somebody talking about this, talk about 400 different modes of therapy. But I'm talking about really a categorization of therapy. So talk therapy versus
Play
non-talk
therapy.
therapy. Sorry, or play therapy or something like that. And I think that in the adoption space, we talk about a lot about people talk about the need for adoption competent therapists.
Hmm.
I also think that one of the most profound things that I've seen in or heard from people that I've interviewed, profound and simplest thing that I've heard in terms of what gets in the way of our healing is thinking that thinking that verbal talk therapy, thinking that talk therapy can heal pre-verbal trauma.
Oh, okay.
So it's this idea of that Bessel van der Kolk's made popular. The body keeps the score. So
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
the issue is in the
Uh-huh.
tissue. We need to
Yeah.
do somatic. We need to do somatic kind of non-verbal therapy. And
Ah,
I think that's a really big thing that people miss out on. And clearly, no therapy is totally non-verbal,
right.
right? I've done
No,
some.
but I understand what you're saying, and I let the issues in the tissue. I've never heard that, but I can understand that.
Yeah.
But I
I,
think also about like when we talked about PTSD, the issues in the tissue. So thinking about like, for example, when they talk about African Americans and being part of the Mid-Atlantic slave trade and how the impact of slavery, that trauma impacts African Americans for future generations, right?
yeah.
I'm impacted by it, not because somebody not because I've had conversations about it, but because it is in my DNA.
Yeah.
And the trauma exists within me. It's in my tissue, right?
Yeah. And that they call some people call that generational trauma. And it there's I we used to go on holiday to the Gambia in Africa. Went
Hmm.
for many years. Had fantastic time there, fantastic people there. But that was so you remember the Alex Haley book
Of
Roots,
course,
yeah.
yes.
So um, Alex Haley, the Kunta Kinte
Yes,
was Mandinka tribe, right?
right.
and we were served in the restaurants in the hotel
By
of the place
Mandinka.
in the game by Mandinka and different tribes. I can't remember the other names, but the Gambia was kind of the one of the epicenters of the slave trade,
I did. I
and
did. I
I
don't think I knew
wow
that. Yeah.
yeah wow. I mean it was yeah I'm getting goosebumps because I couldn't believe how they were with us, given how they were with us, the Gambians were with us,
Right.
given how we, and I'm talking
Mm.
about, obviously
Yeah.
my British forefathers were
Yeah.
with
With their
with them.
forefathers.
Sorry?
With their
Yeah,
forefathers.
with
With
their
their
forefathers. Yeah,
ancestors.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, with their ancestors. But it was incredibly. Yeah, the first time we went there, I got a call one day, and my best my best friend had died at home, and they tracked me down. This was
Uh,
before mobile phones overseas, right?
uh-huh. Yeah.
And the so his widow, right, gave me the news, and I was devastated. And the guy, the one of the waiters, a couple hours later, went down for dinner, and the waiter could tell there was something wrong with me, and he said, "What's up?" And I shared him with him, and he he said, "May his soul rest in peace." And the the it was an amazing moment for me, and another time. A few years later, we went back and we'd been tipping the guys because they were on they were on about $25 a month, right? The waiters,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
That
uh,
sounds about
and
right.
and they ate probably £27 of rice,
Mm-hmm.
$27 of rice. They were always in deficit, and so I gave we we tipped one of the guys, and we tipped him before, and he came out from behind the bar, and he gave me a big hug, and he said, uh, it's not about the money, Simon." It
Mm.
was incredibly humbling moment because I'd been talking to him, I'd been hearing about his story. He wasn't from the Gambia, he was from Sierra Leone.
Uh-huh.
So Sierra Leone was at war at that stage, so he was in the Gambia to earn money and send
Money
money
back home.
back home. And I asked him about that, and he told me about he hadn't seen his mum for 3 years, and I just thought the guy was an incredible guy, and I'd taken because I'm interested in people. I'm curious and talk to people. But when I gave him this tip, and he said it's not about the money, Simon. As he gave me a big tip. That was like an
Yeah.
epiphany moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we went down a bit of a side a side road there, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
this
but we're
generational trauma. I mean, it's
generational trauma.
yeah,
So he said it's not about the money. And then what did you think? You thought it was about the connection. It was about the
yeah. It was about the connection. It was about
Mhm.
the friendship. It was about being interested in one another's. It was the opposite of being um, that guy that snaps the fingers at the waiters and
Yeah.
treats
Yeah.
them
That
like slaves,
transactional.
right?
Yeah.
Treats them like slaves or servants. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't like that. We'd had good conversations. He shared stuff, I'd shared stuff, and it was a lovely guy. Yeah, yeah. But what for me, one of the things about you know trauma, generational trauma, or in utero trauma, and those sorts of things, is that, as they say, the issue is in the tissue, and also that our brains are really creative, and they can make a mountain out of a molehill, or a molehill out of a
That's right.
mountain. We
That's
don't know how big the mountain is. We don't know. We don't know whether this generational piece or this
That's
in
right.
utero piece is mountain or a molehill. We've got kind of
Yeah.
no idea. So when I think about myself, I think, well, like I could I can be over I could be over egging it, right? Overestimating it,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
how it's tricky. I did somatic experiencing. I saw a somatic experience so for once a month for 18 months, and it was great. And yeah, because it's somatic, I can't put it into words.
Yeah.
I can't put it into words. But I just thought, well, I want to. I don't know how big the issue is in my tissue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's give it a go and see if it cleans some stuff out. But it cleans out stuff but you don't know whether it's there or not.
Yeah. So it just feels like someone's like a whole bunch of stuff and you don't know what to point to. But
Yeah.
you were adopted when you were a baby, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Weeks
Yeah. Yeah. I
old.
was like 4.5 weeks old. Yeah. Yeah.
And then at some point you you as almost as an adult, then you had this epiphany that you had this I the word that's coming to me is an outburst, but then maybe that's not the right word. But where you felt suddenly you felt harm when you were an
Yeah.
adult. Is that
That's
yeah
right. Yeah. So at 40, I found out that my teddy bear that I'd had forever was from my birth mum. And
right?
my
Right. I
first
remember you telling
reaction, my first reaction was gentle curiosity, but then later on there was an outburst, as you say, and that alerted me. I said she didn't love me enough to keep me. Right, that was the
me.
outburst, and there was some swear words as well. But and the woman that I was talking to said, "I'm a mum, Sam, and I don't think it would have been quite like that." And
Right.
I saw the truth in that in her words, and
Mhm.
I got intellectually that she hadn't rejected me, and that was an insight. But the bigger epiphany came about 10 years later when I got my adoption file and um, read a letter from my birth mum about the teddy bear, which was a I felt her pain.
Yeah.
I felt her love for me, and I connected with her at a spiritual level,
Level.
and that was the big epiphany moment. But this has been it's 19 years since that outburst about the teddy bear. So that happened when I'm 40. I'm 59 now, and there's been lots of insights and epiphanies along the way. The biggest insight of whole is this moment that I had when I merged with her. Me
Yeah.
and me and Pat became one. But it was a spiritual hug. It wasn't. I never
Yeah.
met her. And
Right.
but the epiphany, the healing that I'd had through that epiphany, that insulated me against the loss. So I
Yeah.
6 months later, I found out that she died, and that didn't impact me because I felt I'd met her.
Yeah.
I'd met her spiritually, so I didn't need to meet her physically. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
simplification.
No, I understand. But it sounds like it wasn't about rejection, which is what you thought it was, but maybe it was about protection.
Maybe, maybe, yeah. It wasn't. She didn't reject me, so she made the plan before I was born. She didn't. I didn't come out and she said, "I don't want this one."
Right.
She planned it before, but I'm yeah. So we're coming up on time, and I feel I'm sorry I've talked too much about my stuff really at the end here.
Well,
I'm
we're
supposed to be
talking
interviewing
to
you.
each other. We're
Yeah,
talking to each other about stuff.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So what what would you what would you like to share? Is there anything that you'd like to share, Asia, that I haven't asked you um, about?
I think, as we're closing out, I mean, the healing is complicated. And And it's not, healing is not transactional, right? Like, okay, I have a bruise. Okay, now in 6 months I'll be healed from that. There will be resolution. It's not, emotional healing is not that way. Um, and I feel like it's faceted. As I said earlier, I feel like it's an inside job. So my healing and the way I heal and the amount of time that it takes and the experience that I have with my own healing, my relationship to my own healing is going to be different from anyone else, and their relationship to their own healing. Um, and also who I am now is and how I heal now as a person is different from how I did it 10 years ago or 10 years before that, and it'll probably be different 10 years from now too. So I think it's a really fascinating conversation,
Yeah,
healing, this idea of healing and thriving, because I also feel like thriving is very individual as well.
yeah.
Um, so I
Otherwise, I
don't know.
couldn't have interviewed 670 different people
Right.
about it, right? So, yeah,
That's exactly right. So the conversation continues because it's like it's almost like this never-ending opportunity to explore what it means. And it with every different, with every, the bruise or with every different experience that you might have to heal from, it's almost like an equation. And so you can swap different things out and come up with something different when it comes to
yeah,
healing. So I don't know that we have solved the equation. I don't know that we ever will, because it's just so deeply personal.
yeah. To be continued.
To be continued.
Continued. Yeah. Thank you, Asia, and thank
Thank
you,
you.
listeners. Yeah.
Thank
We'll,
you, Simon.
we'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.
I hope so. I hope
Bye
so.
bye.